The sky burned with colors that no artist could capture, a harsh swirl of violet and crimson that stretched over the ruins of Lyra's home. She walked carefully over the rubble, each step sending small stones tumbling into the deep cracks that scarred the ground. Once this place had been alive, filled with the hum of machines, the laughter of friends, the chatter of a busy city. Now it was silent. The air carried the bitter tang of smoke and metal, and the distant echo of explosions still haunted her ears. She was alone. Her colony was gone, her family vanished, and her life as she had known it had been shattered in the blink of an eye. Lyra's mind kept replaying the moment when the attack came. She had been in the engineering lab, adjusting the cooling system on one of the city's power cores when the first strikes hit. The building shook violently and alarms screamed over the city's network. She remembered the fear, the panic, and then the screams. She had run, dodging debris, helping a few civilians along the way, but by the time she reached the outer gates, it was too late. The enemy had taken everything. Now as she moved through the ruins, she relied on her training. Her hands were steady, her steps deliberate. Every ruined structure, every broken bridge told a story of destruction. She scavenged what she could, small amounts of food, bits of metal, and tools that might still work. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but fear and exhaustion were far worse. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant growl of machines hunting for survivors. She paused near the remnants of a plaza, crouching behind a collapsed wall to catch her breath. Her chest heaved and she wiped the sweat from her brow. That was when she saw him. He moved with confidence, not like the enemy mercenaries, but like someone who belonged to a different world entirely. His uniform was strange, the markings unfamiliar, yet he carried himself with a calm authority. A human. She had heard of them rarely in the archives, but had never met one. Lyra's first instinct was to hide. She had no idea whether he was friend or foe. She considered slipping away, disappearing into the maze of ruined streets. But then she noticed something. He was alone, scanning the ruins, cautious but not hostile. His eyes moved with focus, watching for danger but never threatening her. Curiosity edged out fear. She stepped slightly forward, peeking from her hiding spot. The human saw her immediately, tilting his head slightly as if to gauge her intentions. He raised a hand slowly, not a weapon, but in a gesture of peace. Lyra hesitated, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Could any being, no matter how strange, be trustworthy in a place like this? Before she could decide, a sudden noise erupted nearby. A group of scavengers, smaller but vicious, moving through the ruins with metallic tools clanging. They hadn't seen the human or her yet, and for a moment it seemed they might pass. But then one of them spotted a glint of metal from her scavenged tools and let out a sharp cry. The sound echoed across the empty streets. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. She had no chance alone. But the human did not hesitate. He drew a strange device from his pack, a small handheld object that hummed with energy, and aimed it at the scavengers. A beam of light shot out, forcing them to scatter, their cries of frustration fading into the distance. He turned to her, his eyes calm, and gestured toward a safer alley. Lyra's mind struggled with disbelief. She had never seen anything like this. Machines, weapons, tactics, humans were supposed to be primitive, slow, fragile. Yet here he was, protecting her with nothing more than his presence and a small device. Slowly, she nodded, and together they moved through the narrow streets, keeping low and avoiding further contact. As they walked, Lyra tried to communicate, using a mix of hand signals and basic words she had learned from old human records. The human responded with patience, repeating gestures, showing simple symbols on a device that glowed faintly. They were learning each other in small steps, each gesture building a fragile bridge between worlds. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip below the jagged horizon. Shadows stretched long across the ruins, turning every corner into a potential hiding place for danger. Lyra's exhaustion caught up with her. She stumbled, almost falling into a pit left by a collapsed building. The human caught her instantly, holding her steady. She looked up at him, surprised by the strength in his arms, by the steadiness of his gaze. "You need rest," he said in a soft voice. She understood the words instinctively, though her mind still raced with doubt. Could she truly trust him? Could she allow herself to relax even for a moment? But she had no other choice. She allowed him to guide her to a small sheltered area behind a fallen tower, where debris formed a crude barrier against the wind. He set down a small pack, pulling out water and what little food he had. Lyra took it cautiously, her hands shaking from hunger and exhaustion. Night fell quickly on the alien planet, colder than she expected. The wind cut through the ruins like a blade, and the distant hum of machinery reminded her that danger was never far. She shivered despite the layers of clothing she had salvaged. Without thinking, she moved closer to the human, seeking warmth. He didn't pull away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her, a protective embrace that said more than words could. In that moment, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Not just physical safety, but a sense that someone cared, that someone understood. She leaned into him, allowing herself to relax slightly, letting the tight coil of fear in her chest loosen. For the first time since the attack, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The night was long. The human remained vigilant, scanning the shadows, listening for any movement. Lyra could see the tension in his posture, yet there was patience in his eyes, a quiet determination to keep her safe. They didn't speak much, not yet. Words were unnecessary. Their bond was forming in silence, in shared danger, in the small, deliberate acts of care that transcended species and culture. Hours later, as the sky shifted to a deeper shade of blue, Lyra dared to ask a question. "Why, help me?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. The human looked down at her, expression calm. "Because no one should be alone." The simplicity of the answer struck her. No elaborate explanations, no hidden motives, just an honest human truth. Lyra's thoughts turned inward. She had spent so long alone, trusting no one, believing that survival meant solitude. But this human had shown her another way. Perhaps trust was not a weakness, perhaps it was a strength. Perhaps connection, even in a world as broken as this one, could exist. The night passed slowly. They shared no words, but every movement, every glance, every small gesture strengthened their fragile bond. Lyra realized that while she had lost everything, she was not entirely without hope. This human, this stranger from another world, had given her the first reason to believe in tomorrow. As dawn approached, a soft light filtered through the ruins. Lyra looked around at the shattered city, at the jagged towers and smoking craters, and then at the human who had kept her safe through the night. She didn't know what the day would bring, more danger, more uncertainty, but she knew she would face it with him by her side. And for the first time since the attack, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not just about survival, but about hope, courage, and perhaps in some distant way, trust and friendship. The planet was still dangerous, the ruins still silent and foreboding, but Lyra no longer felt entirely lost. With the human's arms around her, she felt a spark of something she thought she had forgotten, something stronger than fear, stronger than despair. And in that fragile, precious spark, she found a reason to keep moving forward. The sun rose fully, casting long shadows across the broken city. Lyra tightened her grip on the human's arm, drawing strength from his presence. Together they stepped out from the shelter of the ruins, ready to face whatever the day would bring. And though the world around them was harsh and unforgiving, Lyra felt for the first time in her life that she was not alone. The ruins were quieter than Lyra expected, but the silence carried a hidden danger. The wind whispered across the broken towers, and the occasional distant hum of machines reminded her that the planet was never truly still. She and Jason moved cautiously, keeping close to the shadows of the collapsed structures, scanning for threats. She could feel the human's presence beside her, steady and unyielding, giving her a sense of courage she hadn't known in weeks. As they walked, Jason carried a small scanner that emitted a soft blue light, probing the environment for movement or life signs. Lyra marveled at the simplicity and efficiency of the device. Humans had not been part of her world, and yet this human had come prepared, equipped, and calm under circumstances that would have sent anyone else into panic. She realized again how alone she had been before he arrived, and how much she had relied on her own skills and caution to survive. With him, survival felt more possible, even hopeful. Hours passed and the sun climbed higher, its harsh light cutting through the dust that hung in the air. They reached the edge of the city's ruins where a vast chasm split the ground. The bridge that once connected the two sides had collapsed, leaving jagged beams and unstable metal spans. Lyra's heart sank as she saw it. This was a natural trap for anyone trying to cross. Loose debris, sharp edges, and the possibility of hidden enemies. Jason examined the area carefully, crouching to inspect the structure. "We can cross," he said finally, "but we need to move slowly. Watch every step." He looked at her, his eyes steady. Stay close. Lyra nodded, trusting him more than she trusted her own instincts. They began the crossing, moving deliberately across the unstable bridge. The metal creaked under their weight, sending sparks flying in small bursts. Every movement required precision and focus. Lyra felt her pulse quicken, but Jason's calm presence beside her steadied her nerves. He was careful but decisive, moving like someone who had faced danger countless times before. Halfway across, a sudden rumble shook the ground. Lyra froze, her foot slipping slightly on a loose beam. Jason reacted instantly, grabbing her arm and pulling her steady. She looked up at him, breathless, and saw no panic in his face, only concentration, determination, and a quiet reassurance that they would get through this together. They reached the far side safely, but the danger was far from over. As they caught their breath, Lyra noticed movement in the shadows. Mercenaries from the attacking faction approaching with weapons and tools designed for scavenging and destruction. Her stomach twisted with fear. She had faced them before, but now she felt differently. She wasn't alone. Jason stepped in front of her, drawing a small device that emitted a blinding flash. The mercenaries hesitated, shielding their eyes. Lyra felt a surge of admiration and relief. This human, who she had first regarded with suspicion, had become her protector, her shield in a world that offered no safety. Together they moved swiftly, evading the mercenaries, ducking through narrow alleys and climbing over rubble. Every step deepened Lyra's trust, her belief that she could survive not just as a lone engineer, but with someone by her side who truly cared. Night fell again, colder than the previous one. The temperature dropped sharply and the wind cut through their clothes. Lyra's teeth chattered despite the layers she wore. Jason noticed immediately. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She felt warmth spread through her body, not just from his embrace, but from the sense of safety it provided. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the faint scent of his uniform and the faint trace of sunlight that clung to his skin. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Jason looked down at her, his expression calm. "Because no one should face this world alone." The answer was simple, yet it carried weight. Lyra felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Someone cared, not because they had to, not because of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. The next day, they continued their journey. They needed supplies, and they needed to find a safe place to regroup. Lyra led the way, showing Jason hidden pathways and small caches of resources she had discovered. He followed closely, learning quickly, assisting when he could, and protecting when necessary. Together they formed a rhythm, a silent coordination born of necessity and growing trust. As they walked through a narrow canyon, they were suddenly ambushed. A group of scavengers, alerted by the light of Jason's device, charged from the shadows. Lyra prepared to fight, but Jason acted first. He grabbed a tool from his pack and hurled it with precision, knocking two of the attackers off balance. Lyra dodged and countered, using her engineering knowledge to set off small traps she had constructed in the ruins. The fight was chaotic, but together they managed to subdue the attackers. After the dust settled, Lyra felt her adrenaline slowly ebbing, replaced by a strange sense of exhilaration. She looked at Jason, who was brushing dust off his uniform. "We make a good team," he said with a small smile. She nodded, realizing he was right. Alone she might have survived, but together, they had not only survived, they had triumphed over a threat that could have easily ended her life. Days passed, and they found a partially intact settlement on the outskirts of the ruins. It was a small cluster of buildings, abandoned but with enough resources to survive temporarily. Lyra began to feel a sense of relief she had not allowed herself in weeks. She worked alongside Jason, repairing some of the structures, purifying water, and preparing a safe place for the night. That evening, as they rested, Lyra finally allowed herself to reflect on her journey. She had lost everything, yet here she was, still alive, still moving forward. And for the first time since the attack, she felt a sense of hope, not just for survival, but for a future where she could trust someone, where she could feel safe again. Jason noticed her contemplative silence and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into him slightly, feeling comforted. Night came, and the cold wind reminded them both that the world was still harsh. Jason lit a small fire, the glow illuminating their faces. Lyra watched him quietly, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. She had arrived in this place weary, fearful, and alone. Now she had someone who had become her anchor in the storm. She had someone who had proven, through action and patience, that humans were capable of courage, kindness, and understanding beyond what she had imagined. Jason looked at her and smiled faintly. "You've been through so much," he said, "but you're stronger than you know." Lyra met his gaze, feeling a mixture of gratitude and something deeper she couldn't yet name. "I don't feel strong," she admitted quietly. "I feel lucky that you're here." He didn't respond with words. He simply wrapped her in his arms, holding her close against the chill of the night. She felt the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, and a sense of security that had been absent from her life for far too long. She rested against him, closing her eyes, letting herself breathe for the first time in weeks without fear. The following days were spent cautiously exploring the area, fortifying their shelter and gathering supplies. Lyra taught Jason about the planet's hidden dangers, its unstable structures, and the remnants of the technology left behind. In return, Jason shared his knowledge of human survival techniques, strategies for evading detection, and small methods for staying safe in hostile environments. Their collaboration deepened, and with every shared task, Lyra felt her trust solidify into something stronger. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the jagged horizon, Lyra spoke softly. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," she said, "but I feel like I'm not alone anymore." Jason's hand found hers instinctively, squeezing it gently. "You're not," he said. "Not ever, if I can help it." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold night air. She realized that this human had become more than just a protector. He had become a companion, a partner in survival, and perhaps in some unspoken way a reason to hope for the future. She looked at him, understanding that while the world around them was dangerous and uncertain, they would face it together. Weeks passed, and they slowly began to rebuild a small life in the abandoned settlement. Lyra repaired equipment, created safe paths through the ruins, and even managed to cultivate small amounts of food. Jason continued to watch over her, assisting whenever needed but never overshadowing her abilities. He respected her intelligence, her skill, and her courage. And she in turn respected him, not just for his strength, but for his patience, his kindness, and the unwavering support he had given her when she had nothing left. One night, after another long day of work, they sat together outside the settlement, watching the stars flicker in the alien sky. Lyra leaned into Jason, feeling the comfort of his steady presence. "I thought I had lost everything," she whispered. "But you gave me something I didn't think I could have again." Jason looked at her, expression calm but filled with quiet determination. "You didn't lose everything," he said. "You still have yourself. And now you have me. We'll face the future together." For the first time since the attack, Lyra allowed herself to smile genuinely, a smile that carried relief, gratitude, and hope. She realized that no matter how harsh the world could be, no matter